Hit subscribe to the DIY Writer to support your hardworking authors and also lessen your chances of ending up as a victim in their next book. Join me at the first annual Icarus Book Convention, May 8th and 9th. This conference has a great lineup of speakers, including little old me, talking about podcasts, vlogs, and other neat author stuff. Go to Icarus, Iqarus book, con, con.com for more information. Hope to see you there. This is Jeff Bacon from the DIY Writer Podcast. Today we have Dylan Roche. Dylan Roche wrote that's kind of a tongue twister, The Purple Bird, which is a novel. But if you look at his website, DylanRocheWriter.com, which the link will be down below in the show notes, you also see that he's a journalist, a bloggist, an author, and he does quite a few things for the writing community. So we're going to kind of get into that. But at first, how are you doing today, Dylan?
I'm doing great. I'm doing excellent. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
Good.
It's Thursday, Friday Junior.
Right.
So happy about that. That way, get down with my Friday so I can work again on Saturday, but so is the life.
I'm the same way. I feel as if, weekends and weekdays, there's really no difference. It's all just an excuse to get writing done.
When I used to work for the man, I used to, Fridays were awesome and Mondays were like, oh God, I have to go back to work.
Right. Yeah.
And when you don't work on a clock, it's kind of interesting how all of a sudden it's like Mondays really don't matter anymore and Fridays don't. And the only time I really mention them is when I'm talking to friends who actually have to work Monday through Friday and get a weekend off.
Right. Or if you are a journalist and you are counting on people to be sort of available in the weekday, that means it's easier to schedule interviews Monday through Friday, and then Saturdays and Sundays are an easy time to clear your schedule and get some good writing done, no matter what your project of the day is, whether it's a novel or whether it is, a feature for a magazine or a blog post or what have you. Saturdays and Sundays are a good chance to get writing done, I always say.
Saturdays and Sundays, actually Friday, Saturday, Sundays are my catch-up days, and then Monday through Thursday are my interview days, and whatever else happens to pop up.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
But so let's talk about The Purple Bird. What can you tell us about that?
Well, so Purple Bird is it's a YA fantasy novel, and it has kind of been my passion project for the last however many number of years. That in between all of my professional writing pursuits, I think that you talk to anybody who is in any sort of writing profession, and they've always got that novel in their back pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And they're always, oh, I'm working on a novel whenever I get the chance, or I have this dream of writing a novel. And for me, that was The Purple Bird, and that was something that I started in college, and it was based on this fantasy world that I had created as a kid. I was really into world building and all of that nerdy Tolkien, Dungeons and Dragons kind of stuff, and just created my own fantasy world. And then when I went away to college and I'm nursing this idea of, I want to be a novelist one day, and started building out a plot around this world and around all these characters, and wrote it in over the course of 4 years, and just purged a lot of stuff out of my imagination. And I'm talking like my first draft, when I finished it, was somewhere around 200,000 words. And was just this because I digressed and I did all of this, I put in all the history and the politics of this world that I had created. And so then I tried to shop it around and got discouraged because not a lot of people are jumping to pick up a 200,000 word manuscript from an unknown author. And eventually got discouraged, put it on a back burner of my life and just kind of forgot about it. And then maybe around 5 years ago, I pulled it back out and started reading through it. But you know what? I care too much about this. I need to I need to, do something with this. And eventually, found a publisher who was willing to take a chance on me. And it has been just a dream come true, just in terms of like the reception that I've heard from people, and especially young readers, teenagers and middle school students, that whole age, and some advanced elementary readers, all of whom who have read it and just said, this was really awesome. This was so cool. And that meant a lot because that was what I wanted to hear. I wanted to write the ultimate kids book that I would have wanted to read when I was that age. Because I devoured the Chronicles of Narnia and Harry Potter and A Wrinkle in Time and Lord of the Rings, Neverending Story, all that stuff. And I just thought, you know what? I want to create my own version of that. And that's really what The Purple Bird is. It's about this teenage boy named James who one afternoon meets this purple feathered creature named Archit and joins Archit on this quest. Archit wants to become human. And so together with James's sister and cousin, they journey to the world of Nalgordia, and they find themselves called upon to defeat the evil forces and save the kingdom and bring down the supervillain and save the day before they ultimately get the chance to return home. And that old classic story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty much Archit's story in a nutshell. Then from there, when The Purple Bird came out in 2019, I had it in my mind of I want this to be a standalone novel, and heard from people, when are you going to write a sequel? When are you going to write a sequel? So I thought, you know what? I like this world. I like these characters. This story means so much to me. I want to start building it out into a series. And so that's where I am now, is what happens in Nalgordia after this first adventure, and where does it go from here?
Well, that does sound kind of familiar as far as the storyline goes. I mean, yeah. Does the bird ever get to be human?
He does. He does. Now, when he is assigned his quest, and this is sort of tropey and all too familiar, so I don't feel like I'm giving a big spoiler away, but he's ultimately given this quest of, do this by this date and you will become human. And it's not necessarily achieving the quest that transforms him. It's what he learns along the way, what it actually means to be human and what it means to sort of be a good human in terms of selflessness and in terms of heroism. And that being a hero isn't necessarily about swinging a sword and being, being a total badass. Being a hero is about doing what's hard, or doing what's right when it's hard, when it's not easy. And so that's the lesson that he learns along the way from his human friends. Not necessarily that they are aware of it either, because they're three kids who are really being thrown into their first adventure. But this is something that they discover along the way, and from their example, he sort of comes to realize, hey, being human's not as fun and easy as I thought it was going to be.
It's not.
No, it's not. But there is, that was a very rewarding final scene to write, where Archit ultimately becomes human. And, you think about the ending of Pinocchio, where Pinocchio becomes a real boy. I was sort of trying to channel that his human friends just look, and there he is. He's no longer this purple feathered Muppet creature. He is, he's a 16-year-old boy and is just eager to experience the world in a new way.
Very cool. Very cool. So now you're working on the second book in your series.
Yes. Yeah. Working on Return to Nalgordia, which is very much going to be that Archit and James and Margot and Liz are James's sister and cousin, that the four of them get summoned back to Nalgordia again to save the day from another intense supervillain. And my main villain in the first book and probably throughout the series is Archit's uncle who is an evil wizard and has been disguising himself or posing as a high school chemistry teacher. And that is actually how James finds himself like wrapped up in this adventure from the very beginning, is that James realizes his chemistry teacher is an evil wizard, and that's how he finds himself in danger. Ultimately meets Archit, connects the dots, and thinks, oh wait, Archit is this creature that my evil chemistry teacher slash wizard in disguise is tracking down.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, in the sequel, Mr. Birkin comes back and is, posing a new threat to the world of Nalgordia.
Cool. So how much fun are you having writing that?
I'm having a lot of fun. I'm having almost what I think that I don't want to say that I'm having too much fun, because I don't know that that's ever possible to have when writer's block is always a threat, especially, writer's block is always a threat, especially during a pandemic when you're not getting as much inspiration and stimulation as you would like to be getting.
Yeah.
And you're always a little bit stressed out, so you don't always feel like working on your novel. So if you can have those moments where you do get excited about what you're doing, that's always good. But I laugh about saying I'm having too much fun with it. That always proves to be a little bit of a threat, because that usually, if you're having a lot of fun writing your first draft, that means that you're going to have to do a lot of editing on the subsequent drafts. If you're struggling with your first draft, that probably means that you're being a little more careful, and you might have to do less revision down the road.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think there's a balance between those two extremes.
Yeah.
Because you can stifle yourself right into not being very creative while you're writing if you're worried about correcting too many things.
Right.
On the other hand, if you just go nuts, you're going to write crap that has to, here's your third draft that you have to write because you messed it up the first time.
3 drafts sounds easy. I think
Yeah.
I'll take 3 drafts anytime. I think that, in order to get a book in the shape that it needs to be in, sometimes you're going up to like 10 drafts. And that's okay, because there's always a broader picture in the very beginning, that when you write your first draft, you're just getting everything out of you, and you have to keep telling yourself, you know what, this is just your first draft, it's just your rough draft, have fun with it. But you usually have that little self-editor in the back of your head saying, no, this sentence isn't too good. And if you're agonizing over every last sentence and making it perfect, save that for draft 10. Mm-hmm. Draft 1, just get everything out of you, and don't agonize over getting every last sentence perfect, because you're going to have to rewrite the whole thing anyway.
So is it different for you in writing a novel versus writing an article, or doing something in journalism? Is it kind of the same process, or?
It is, because you have your planning stage or your organizing stage, where you're just trying to figure out a basic structure or a basic outline. An article or a magazine feature, those are going to be shorter. They might be anywhere between like 400 words and 1,500 words. So that's nowhere near, a 100 word or a 100,000 word novel. But you do have to follow the same process, just in terms of getting your outline and trying to figure out what you're trying to say and what your message is. And then just writing the darn thing. And then after that, going back and trying to make it look like you knew what you were doing all along. Which I think is a quote by Neil Gaiman, where he says, you write your first draft, and then your second draft, you go back and try to make it look like you knew what you were doing. And that's mm-hmm. really true with journalism, as well as fiction writing, that your first draft is going to be rough. You have to go back and say, okay, this is what I got out of me. This is, my lump of clay right here. Let me now try to make it pretty.
So let's jump into the journalism a little bit.
Sure.
So you find something that you want to write about, that you care about. Do you always write for the same magazine, or do you throw it out there for?
I mean, I am writing for any 5 to 7 magazines or websites in any given month.
Yeah.
Most of them, I've never really had a. I've been very fortunate in that, like, I've never had to or been tempted to get into any sort of like double pitching war where I pitch the same story to any like to where I pitch the same story to multiple magazines and have to like go with whoever offers me the best offer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very type B in that, like, I wouldn't ever want to get into that. And I've been very fortunate up to this point in my career that I've never had to do that. Usually if I pitch a story, they will accept it, or on the rare occasion they might say, you know what, this really isn't what we're looking for, and then I'm able to sort of take it to someone else and say, hey,
Sure.
are you interested in this one?
Okay.
But I'm very blessed to have a great relationship with all of the publications that I'm writing for, and they will pitch ideas to me, or if I pitch ideas to them, that it's always a very it's a very productive back and forth in that regard, I think.
Okay. So how does one get started with that? I mean, do you just throw out? I mean, is it kind of like publishing? You write something and query it out to magazines that have may, could possibly have an interest in it, or what?
Sometimes yes, that you will have an idea and you'll start working on it, and then you'll pitch it to somebody. But most of the time, what I have been fortunate in is that once I have a relationship with those publications, then they come to me and they say, hey, we need somebody to write an article on this. Are you interested? And I'll say, yeah. And then that way I don't have to, it's not on me to brainstorm the story ideas. And I'm always brainstorming story ideas. I'm always trying to come up with topics for a new article. And that's a big part of being a successful journalist, is always, playing around with those thoughts and trying to come up with good material. But I'm very fortunate in that the publications I write for come to me and say, hey, we're looking for somebody to write about this. We think you'd be great for it.
Cool. So what kind of stuff do you write about?
Ooh, now this is what I love about journalism, is that I am able to write a little bit of everything. I'm able to write about health and fitness and nutrition. That's been a big one for me. Obviously, being a long distance runner, that's something I'm really passionate about. So I love doing that. I am also obviously an artist, so I love to write about arts and culture. And then I have been able to write about youth and education and child development, which is exciting because I also am a theater teacher on the side and direct children's theater and volunteer with children's theater and all of that good stuff. So I work with teenagers a lot, and being able to write about youth development is another thing that's really exciting for me. So I write a broad range of topics, and they're all things that I'm passionate about in my own way.
Okay. That's got to be kind of rewarding, but also tough, working with teenagers in theater.
You know what? Maybe yes. There are times when it's trying, and there are times when it's harder than others. But for the most part, it is a lot of fun.
Really?
It's great. Yeah. Oh yeah. I love it. I mean, I think that in the arts, if you grew up in the arts, you always have an interest in giving back and paying it forward, because you recognize that when you were a teenager, or even younger, when you were elementary, middle school, that there was an adult there who helped nurture your talent, helped encourage you. And so I think that a lot of people who grew up doing that always feel a need to kind of pay it forward. And this is sort of my way of doing that, is I want to be the adult like some of the adults I had when I was younger. So I find it very rewarding in that regard. But I mean, teenagers are brilliant artists. I mean, in terms of like theater or writing or what have you, they have great imaginations. They have so much talent, and they don't have, the world has really does a stomping on you when you're an adult. They really like burden you with a lot of inhibitions. You have a lot of like self-consciousness. And I think that the younger you are, the less you've had to deal with all of that BS. And it's like it's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to get your imagination going at that age.
I think that's what takes people from YA writers to horror.
Yeah, yes. Well, and I'm a big horror reader myself. I love horror. So I actually I've never heard that before, but I really like that theory.
Just right here, man. It just came right out.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So is that where you do your screenwriting, is for the theater that you run, or do you run your own plays, or do you submit those?
No, I mean, I volunteer with some of the theaters in our area, and that has been where where some of my scripts have been produced, have been on stage in the local area.
Very cool. Very cool. So you also blog.
I do. So I blog for some I blog for some small businesses. I blog for myself to some extent. I'm not as active as I should be. I'm trying to be better about that. But I think that when you're writing for so many other outlets, it's always the carpenter's children who go barefoot. Or I'm sorry, it's always the cobbler's children who go barefoot. Yeah. Carpenter is a whole other industry. But it's always the cobbler's children who go barefoot. And so when you're writing for so many different outlets, sometimes updating my blog is not at the top of my to-do list, which it should be. And especially when I want to really live life to the fullest, because I think that as a writer, you really need to have a wide variety of life experiences to draw from. And I think that just blogging about some of the fun stuff that you do in everyday life will make you a stronger writer. So even if I'm not like blogging for the sake of like, promoting anything or, all that good stuff, I still want to just blog just for the sake of like practicing my craft. You can never practice your craft enough.
That I agree with.
Yeah.
That I agree with. I blog for, in my other life, a couple of businesses, and I do it under a pen name, which is, fine. And some of the things I agree with, some things they say, hey, I want you to write an article on this. It's like, oh, good. Okay, cool. And you have to be, you're writing whatever it is. But I find that that's, whether I think it's fiction or not, it is something to kind of practice at. And again, it's, 400, 500, 600 words, easy to rip out, but you have to be fairly concise, and you also have to get to a point fairly quick. Otherwise you'll lose readers real quick.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
But I do find that fun. I don't really blog for myself because, the only blogs I put out are on the podcast. That's it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I know that we've sort of mentioned that I'm a long distance runner. So if I have like a cool marathon or something like that, I'll blog about it because, as I said, it's just one more exercise in creativity and one more way of saying like, here are thoughts in my head. Let me get them out into a Microsoft Word document in a coherent way and try to tell a good story out of this.
That'd be kind of fun is wear a lapel mic or something like that. And while you're running your marathon, and then throw your ideas out there and say, okay, at mile 13, I was thinking this.
I don't know that anybody wants to hear what's going through my head
during a
marathon. Especially when, let me just say that when you're at mile 15 and someone is standing on the sidelines with the audacity to hold a sign that says, you're almost there. And you're thinking, no, I'm at mile 15. I have another 11 miles to go. There are some choice vocabulary words that go through your head when you see that sign.
You're saying that wouldn't be YA? That wouldn't be
That would not,
older?
yeah, no, that would certainly not fit the YA audience at all.
Oh, okay.
No.
So you've developed a career out of basically writing. So I mean, you're a
Uh-huh.
novelist, you're a journalist, you're a blogger. You know, you write
Yeah.
screenplays and all sorts of stuff. I mean, how do you like that life? I mean, it's it like we talked a little bit before. I mean, it is a secluded life.
Uh-huh. It is. And I think that that's one of the reasons that you need to be proactive about getting out there and experiencing life more fully. Because you know, if I spend all day long at my writing desk, I really don't have any life experiences to draw from. And I tend to be a little bit introverted and a little bit shy in
Mhm.
everyday life. And so I have to actually force myself, you know what, you need to go out there and you need to be conscious about living. And I think that that is especially hard, as I said, during lockdowns and during self-isolation during this pandemic, because you're really not getting the inspiration that you need. And you have all the time in the world to write, but you don't have that saying like,
Well,
yeah, I'm really excited about telling this story, or I just had a great I just had a great experience and I want to sit down and create art right now. You just sort of like,
I think
okay, here we go again.
what I find is that if I can't get out of the house and go do something,
Mhm.
I miss out on even just going to the grocery store or something like that and just watching people. I also find that my shopping excursions take much longer nowadays because I'm observing people. But the
Right.
stupid stuff they say, the stupid stuff they do, or the funny things that happen to them while they're picking up a can of beans and they drop it, and they also drop 12 other cans of beans, and then the dumb stuff they say to each other. I mean, those are all things that ignite. It's like, oh, that's a good line. I got to write that down, or that's a good phrase. I haven't heard that one yet, or
Yeah.
watching teenagers in a store, just screwing with each other. I mean, that's hilarious. I mean, that's all good stuff too, and you write these notes or take a picture in your phone and just look at that. Hey, yeah, off you
Right,
run.
exactly. Yeah, no, I will love to like have just some weird interaction in public, and then I can just tweet about it and just say like, yeah, this just happened, but here's a little 240 character slice of life right here of some like, you know, something stupid that somebody said or something funny that I
Mhm.
observed. It's all of that is writing. And I love hearing you say that, because I think that we have it in our head that writing has to be a formal project. And sometimes it's just, like a little like 20-word flash fiction where you give a slice of life and everybody reads it and thinks, oh, that's so relatable. That's so funny. I've seen
Mhm.
something similar to that before. Um, and yeah, I think that goes, what am I trying to say? Um, Experiences for or opportunities for writing and storytelling are all around us. And when you build a life around that, when you are a full-time writer, you start to look for that a little bit more.
Mhm.
You know, as you said, you're more keenly aware of, when I go out in public, I am going to have some sort of idea come present itself to me.
You know what I find really interesting right now, especially during the whole, I mean, towards the end of the pandemic, or are we in the middle? God knows where we're at.
Who
Whatever
knows
we
where?
are, everybody's wearing
Right.
them, or a lot of people are wearing masks.
Uh-huh.
And what I find interesting is there's people that I know that are very introverted, that they will not make eye contact if you meet them on the street, and,
Mhm.
and if they don't know you, I mean, they're very, oh my God, are you
Yeah.
looking at me? Whatever. But what I've found is over the duration of having to wear masks, that
Uh-huh.
for some reason the mask has made them a little more ballsy. I mean, to where they're starting to have conversations with the checkout clerks,
Yeah.
or they're having conversations with people while they're picking out produce or a pair of pants or whatever. And I think it's really funny. the types of things that comes out of their mouths. I mean, some of it's really weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some
Well,
of it you're like, friendly person, axe murderer. Not sure yet. You kind of want to follow through and see where this whole thing goes. Are you driving a Bentley or are you driving a panel van? I don't know. But I mean, it's kind of fun.
it is. And I think that because most of us are like cooped up with our thoughts all day, we are much more apt to just word vomit on strangers in public. Because it's like when you're talking to the cashier at the grocery store, it's like, oh my gosh, somebody new. Let me
Human interaction.
Right. Let me tell you about all the weird, crazy stuff that's been going on in my head for the last 24 hours.
Yep. And what I do like about masks is that you can make faces at them and they don't know.
Exactly. Yes.
It's like, oh my God, really? While keeping your eyes like, oh yeah, really?
Well, but I'm so dumb. I will go around and just smile at people with my mask on, not realizing they can't see me when I have my mask on. And I'm just walking through the grocery store, like happy and just trying to spread a little sunshine to everybody. And nobody knows that I'm smiling under my mask.
I like to click my tongue like that,
okay,
and then look around at other people to see who like, did
who
you do
picked
that?
up on it?
Did you do that? And just I mean, so if you're all like our grocery stores, there's one of them here that's just a mess. They're always, it'll be the busiest time of the day, and they're stocking shelves.
Right.
And they have these big pallets that they're bringing out. They'll put them right in the middle, and there's they have an ingress and egress problem as far as getting in and out of the aisle.
Sure.
And what's really funny is that you get cart jams. And there's a whole bunch of people. So then you do something stupid like that. Like, you click your tongue or, whatever. And then you start looking around and everybody's kind of like, did you do that? I mean, nobody knows. And it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
And it's especially fun when you get an old crotchety guy in there and he's like, I didn't do that. It wasn't me, and they start, and it's kind of word vomit, but setting off a crowd is awfully fun too.
I think, yeah. I mean, you gotta find ways to keep life a little bit interesting these days.
But the things they say are very interesting because then all of a sudden, you're in observation mode, and it's like, oh, cool, yeah,
yeah.
And that's where you get your little lines and everything. But it's been different.
I love, and I wish that I could come up with some good examples off the top of my head, but I do love those little instances where you have an interaction with somebody in public, or you have an exchange, not even with a stranger, but just maybe like with a friend or something like that, where you think, oh, that's something that I want to include in my next script or my next play, or that's like a good idea. And I think that, I'll always be taking down notes in my phone. Or I say like, oh, this was a witty exchange of dialogue that I need to work into a scene somewhere or something like that. So yeah, no, and sometimes you have to be the instigator of that, as you said. Like sometimes you need to click your tongue behind your mask in the grocery store. Other times there's little effort required on your part. You can just step back and watch, the weird circus of humanity do its thing.
Absolutely. Last night I was at my youngest, or not my youngest daughter, but my 3-year-old's in dance. And they have these bleachers that you sit in. It's all very, social distance and everything. And this lady comes up and she says, and they have X's where you're supposed to sit. That way, that you're actually 6 foot apart.
Right.
And it kind of works, kind of doesn't. I mean, it is what it is. But what was funny was the lady was like, do I sit on the X's or do I not sit on the X's? I mean, do I, and trying to figure that out. And so I started messing with her. My wife actually hit me. And told me that was quite enough. But I said, okay, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, you sit on the X's, and then they leave Tuesdays and Thursdays for disinfecting the X's, so you don't sit on the X's. So what day is it? And then another lady piped in and said, well, that's only on odd days. On even days of the month, then you have to sit the opposite of what it's actually supposed to be. And this lady's like, well, this sounds really confusing. It's like, no. It's very simple. So today is, the 3rd of February. Okay. And I just gave away the date. So, whenever, whatever. But so obviously today, and it's Wednesday,
Right.
So you must not sit on the X because it's an odd day. Unless, of course, it's in February, and that's only got 28 days, so then it kind of messes it up a little bit. And just kept on going. And my wife finally said, "Would you just let her sit down?" It's like, no, this is way too cool.
Right. Well, and I mean, you kind of fried my brain with the whole like Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, even days, odd days. I'm like, if somebody tried to pull that on me in public, I'd be like, I'm just going to stand. I'm not even going to sit down anyway. That solves that problem. But it's the fun stuff like that where I'm like, okay, that would be a cool blogging opportunity where, there's really no benefit for that story to be told other than it's funny and it gives you a chance to flex your writing skills, and maybe somebody will take a little bit of joy from reading it. And you just collect little stories like that wherever you go, and it's fun. I think we're all storytellers. Everybody.
Mhm.
I talk to so many people who are like, oh, I could never write, but we all love telling stories. I mean, have you ever met somebody who doesn't have a funny story of something that's happened to them that they enjoy telling?
Yes, I
Oh, you
have.
have?
Oh
Okay.
yeah,
Well, then I
yeah.
stand corrected. Maybe we're not all writers, but you
No,
know,
this nope.
but I think that we all observe the world around us. We all want to, you know, share in that, like, you know, share in talking about the human experience. And, um, some of us are just more adept at writing it down in words on paper, but that's not necessarily because I have some gift. I think that's just
Mhm.
because I read a lot and I write a lot and I'm more comfortable doing it. But you
I
know,
think and I know a few people who can't tell a story to save their life because
yeah,
they are very detail orientated. So you get to understand not only the blade of grass that they sat on, but also the color genre, the phylum, and what kind of, it was ryegrass, and that grows really good
oh
in
gosh,
spring, and you're like, oh, what the hell, just get to it, we're having a beer, dude. But
right, oh my gosh, yeah,
I mean, so there's some people that are, inept in it, I guess. But for the most part, if you get a group of guys or a group and you're all sitting down and you start seeing the inhibitions kind of, meld away as they have one beer or another beer or another beer. And you start hearing the stories. Everybody's trying to outdo each other with, some sort of a buildup of tension and then a release with a funny line or something like that. And you can see that there are crowds of people who can tell stories.
yeah, oh yeah.
They just don't write them down.
No, but sometimes storytelling can be a little bit more fun that way. So here's one of my nerdy asides, but like I'm a big Shakespeare fan. And
Hmm.
what's so much fun about Shakespeare is not just the heightened language, but the heightened emotion. That everything in Shakespeare is very go big or go home. When people are sad, they are sad. When people are angry, they are angry. When people are in love, they are in love. And there's no there's no minimalism to the emotional stakes in Shakespeare. And that's very true of people who have been drinking as well. That
Yes.
when they're drinking, they always have to like one up each other. Everything gets bigger, everything gets more dramatic.
Hmm.
And to an extent, that can be very refreshing because we, as a society, seem to think that we need to like bottle up our emotions. And when you're trying to tell stories and when you're trying to um, tap into emotional stakes that make a compelling narrative, you really can't do that by being very mellow. You can't
Right.
tell a good story when you're just moderately sad or moderately angry. It's those extremes that tend to be a lot more interesting.
I look when I hear stuff like that, I automatically think of Ben Stein,
Yeah, okay.
and just the, like every time that he plays a part in a, in a movie or on TV or whatever, it's always, hi, my name's Ben Stein, and he's very articulate, very intelligent, but very, very dry. And that's what makes it funny, is that he's just so dry and oblivious to everybody else, just really doesn't want to have to hear what he said. I mean, his famous line, Bueller, Bueller,
Bueller. And I was
Bueller.
going to say, like, everybody knows that, like, how many people say Bueller, Bueller, because
Oh.
we all remember that. We all remember a 10-second clip from that whole movie
Yeah.
because it's freaking hilarious.
But if you're in a bar telling a story, nobody wants to hear from Ben Stein.
No, they would rather hear from Shakespeare.
Right.
They would
Exactly.
rather hear from the guy who is way over the top.
I interviewed a guy here a couple weeks ago, and he's got an entire mug that's got just Shakespearean insults on it. The whole thing's just insults.
Shakespeare was great at insults. I mean, all kidding aside, Shakespeare gets this like stuffy, like, persona where people think that it's this like untouchable, sacred, like that you have to be super smart and super mature in order to understand it. I'm like, you do realize that Shakespeare is so foul. Like, he is, I mean, dirty jokes and, sex and violence, and like, you get all of that stuff in Shakespeare. And insults are just one of many things that he's really good at.
I think it's because of the vernacular. I mean, if you changed the actual sentence to say something that would be a little more modern, then I think more people would get it.
Yes, exactly. But and that was the fun. I remember, AP English in high school. I was, because I was reading Shakespeare for fun and I was much more comfortable with it. And the teacher would read something and say, like, does anybody understand what this means? And there I am raising my hand saying, yeah, it's a dick joke. And everybody's like, you can't say dick joke in English class. I'm like, well, we just read a dick joke that Shakespeare said. What am I supposed to do about it?
Mm-hmm. And that, again, it's the times and everything else that he wrote in, where those things were like, oh my gosh, and that's what drew people to the theater, was being risky.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And it, I'm not trying to say that Shakespeare is completely, is nothing but foul stuff. Like, Shakespeare is brilliant. He's beautiful. He expressed our emotions in ways that, like, no other writer really ever has.
He probably, the real life situation. So, I mean, if you're sitting with, your best pal, and, you guys are just talking smack, those are the types of things that you would expect to hear, just two guys just, throwing, shit bombs at each other or whatever.
Right.
And, I think it gets taken out of context because it is, the age that it was written in or whatever. But I can totally see that, oh my God, Shakespeare's got another play out. Let's go see what he's going to try and pull now, because, it'd be the same thing as seeing, a comedian nowadays going up and telling a story. And it's like, I'm just going just to see what he's going to say next, because that was Shakespeare, plus he would tell a good story, so he had his plot. And then when he wrote his dialogue for it in his screenplays and in his stories, he would add the color into it, he'd be able to bring up the tension, but he'd also be able to bring it down with a dick joke or a,
right.
whatever.
Yeah. Well, and that Shakespeare, as great as his plots were, like, there were some plot holes, and there are some anachronisms, and there are some things that don't work, where I think when we as writers are trying to tell a good story, we sometimes get hung up on the details and get hung up on every little last thing. And what you don't realize is that if your characters are interesting enough, if your stakes are good enough, if people get drawn into your story, they're willing to forgive. I'm not saying that, like, you should go out of your way to fill your story with plot holes. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. But that, like, people are willing to suspend their disbelief, and they're willing to be a little bit more forgiving. I think a great point in Shakespeare's is in Twelfth Night. He's got these two characters, Viola and Sebastian, who he really can't decide whether they are twins or whether they are just brother and sister throughout that plot. Like there are lines that make reference to Viola's birthday, that Sebastian mentions Viola's birthday, but if they were twins, like he'd say our birthday. But they make reference to them being twins as well. And so it's like nobody really cares whether they're twins or not because the story is so good and we are so invested in the characters. And this was something, I realize I'm jumping from like Shakespeare to Disney movies now, but like this was something I realized last Halloween with Hocus Pocus, which is a great movie. Every 90s kid is going to agree that that's like a masterpiece. But if you watch that as an adult, there are so many plot holes, but none of us care. We all suspend our disbelief because it's so much fun and we just are there to enjoy the ride. And I think that's a good point to bring up about writing from time to time is that, yes, be detail oriented, but as you said, don't get so hung up on the details that you forget to tell a good story.
Well, there's that, and then there's also being very concise in your writing. I know some writers. I read what they what they can pack in a sentence, and it's like, holy crap! I want to be like you when I grow up. I mean, just very good. And then I read other writers that it's like, oh, I hope I don't do that.
Right. Well, and that's not necessarily a mark of a bad writer as much as just an untrained writer, that they might not have had a writer giving them advice saying, like, you know what, you don't have to describe all five senses with this description here.
Just a minute, let me write that down. You don't have to describe. No, just kidding.
No, but I mean, that if they're painting a scene, they want to tell you what it looks like and what it smells like and what color it is and how it feels. And sometimes less is more, because when you bog your descriptions down with too much, then it loses a sense of relatability.
The thing that pops to mind is in a class that I took, the guy was talking about the smell of a dead body. And he said that in every thriller that he's ever read, it was always, this smell, and they'd try and go into great depths or they'd take great measures to actually try and describe the smell of the body. And he came up with, I no longer care about what that body smells like, but I'm going to try and do something else. Sure. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take another sense and say, I heard the flies buzzing around, and, so he described the sounds instead of the actual smell or the sight of the body, which I thought was very interesting. But he said that, at times you want to focus on one sense, and it shouldn't be the sense that you think you should. Maybe it's something else, or the taste of the air. Or, things like that versus, trying to do the old, well, it smelled like, grandma's old shoe just got humped by the dog and, whatever. Yeah.
Right. No. And I think that when you try to get too over the top with stuff like that, people have trouble relating to it. All of us, if you just give me one or two specific details, that's enough for my imagination to fill in the holes. It's hard for us to remember that when we get so excited about it.
And if you haven't ever smelled something that's been dead and decaying for a little while,
right,
there's no way you can explain that.
No, exactly.
You cannot explain, a little dead mouse doesn't count. That really doesn't smell like like a dead cow.
Right.
Or, something, go to a rendering plant and go take a whiff at that, with the that type of stuff.
Yeah. No, and I will never forget. I was out for a run one day, and I was close to getting home, so I was on the shoulder of one of the residential roads, and there was a deer that had been hit by a car.
Oh yeah.
And was lying right there on the side of the road on a hot day in August. And as I rode by it, I smelled it before I saw it, but I just remember smelling it and thinking like, oh God, what is that? And then of course I look and I see this deer lying right there in my path.
Yep.
That was not a proud moment for me. My reaction to that, I would like to say that I
Wasn't as heroic as you thought it would be.
Oh, I would like to say that like I ran by it and I was like, oh yeah, no big deal. But no, there was like a stunning display of courage on my part where I just like screamed and ran over to the other side of the road. Glad that nobody was there to see this guy almost step on a dead deer.
Well, thank God you didn't say something like that on a podcast. So your secret is safe with me.
Yeah, I'm sure that. Trust me, at this point, there are worse things I could divulge. I'm just like, whatever. This is more fun to just tell stories this way.
I get a kick out of I've got a friend who has seen a lot, and he's done a lot. He's been in the he was in the Army, and I mean, you see this guy, you don't want to mess with him. You can just see it in his eyes. You can just see all sorts of things, and that he's seen some crap,
right?
And I've never seen him flinch except for when a mouse ran across a gym floor.
Oh yeah.
It just shocked him. Oh, God. I was like, what the hell was that? Huh? Right? That big bad mouse scare you? And of course, that was 15 minutes worth of crap. He got pissed off and left, and we all thought he was going to be out in the parking lot waiting for us to shoot us. But whatever.
Right, exactly. But you got a good story out of that.
Yeah, it was a really good story. He's probably still going to shoot me. Hopefully he doesn't listen to this podcast, because he'll know who he is. But I'm not going to mention him.
If you're listening to this podcast, dude, like I'll just say we're laughing about the fact that I stepped on a dead deer and screamed my head off.
There you go. Not a mouse 40 foot away.
I get how it goes.
Yeah, no, people being scared of spiders and stuff like that, I think it's rather funny. But then I talked to some of my friends in Australia, and go ahead and be scared of that spider, because it might kill you, that type of a thing. So
well, but I think that we all have everybody has like a strange fear or a weird phobia that is silly to the rest of the world, but it is very real to us. And that's one of the things that I get excited about as a writer, is kind of figuring out what, if everybody has one of those weird fears, what is the reason behind it?
Yep.
So I don't know.
Yep. Killer clowns will get me every time.
Yeah, killer clowns are scary. I'm trying to think of what else.
Snakes.
Right.
The normal stuff. The one thing that I think is really funny is I used to see this on Facebook every now and then, and it absolutely mesmerized me. But it'd be people that they'd hold their hand up and they'd have holes in their skin. And it was a Photoshop thing. And it'd be like, if this bothers you, you have a certain a fear of holes or whatever, and it'd be really weird. But I'd be sitting there looking at like, man, that is so cool. Look, that goes right through her hand. They'd be black holes. They wouldn't be like bloody gory shot through the hand holes or whatever. But I for some reason that type of stuff just really fascinates me. Yeah. To whereas my oldest daughter, she looked at it and had to look away right away, because like, oh my God, that's gross. I can't watch that. And it's like, why? Look at it again. Show me that reaction.
Right. Yeah.
And just a PSA, that's the shit us authors look for. Getting a reaction out of you.
Right. Exactly. Right.
Because we want to be able to categorize that reaction and write it down and say, oh, this is how this person would react.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's all about creating vivid characters there.
Absolutely. So we're kind of running up on an hour here. We're actually running up on an hour here. Is there anything else you want to tell your fans?
No, I mean, be sure to pick up a copy of The Purple Bird, and keep an eye out for the sequel. If people want to find out more about me, there's my website, DylanRocheWriter.com. They can go ahead and follow me on Twitter and Instagram @DylanIsWriting. And I've got a couple manuscripts in the work right now that I'm excited about, and I think I feel like that's it. Yeah.
Cool.
But also that like I want to do everything that I can to encourage other writers. So don't ever hesitate to like contact me, and I'm happy to like swap tips and swap advice and all that good stuff.
The one thing we didn't talk about that we mentioned in the when we're before we started taping the show was Get Lit.
Yes. Okay. So I'm a member of the Eastern Shore Writers Association, and it represents the whole Delmarva Peninsula. And one of the things that I'm doing with them is I host a monthly writers group. It called Get Lit, Discussions on Creating Compelling Literature, and it's a fiction writing group once a month. And because everything is on Zoom, you don't necessarily have to live in the Delmarva area. It's open. So if anybody would like to join me for discussing compelling literature and how to create compelling literature, go ahead and reach out to me, and I'll get you connected with our group. That would be fantastic.
Very cool.
Because that is an important thing for me is cultivating we discussed several times that writing tends to be a little bit isolating, and I think that people need a place where they can really get encouragement and really get feedback and get support. And so that's always good.
Absolutely. I think those groups, especially when it's peers in close to the same genre, maybe not exactly the same, because there's 452 different genres, underneath or subgenres underneath the genre. So, but getting fantasy and fiction authors together to talk about each other's works is awesome.
Yeah. And even though I write YA fantasy, like it's open to any fiction genre. We have people who write a little bit of everything. So fantasy might be my fiction genre of choice, but I am all about encouraging anybody of any genre. So certainly don't let that. I wouldn't ever want anybody to think that's like a hindrance or a holdup for them.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah.
Good point. Well, Dylan, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. This is awesome. I appreciate you having me.
It's absolutely my pleasure. And if you ever want to come on again, let me know.
Excellent. Sounds good.
All right. With that, I'm going to say this show is a close. This is Jeff of the DIY Writer telling you to keep your chin up and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Please hit the subscribe button. I get a bonus for every subscriber, and I only need 1,506 more to become a full-time paid employee. Help me, please.